Chosen One. Stop everything you are doing right now. Heaven has something specific to say to you today, and it cannot wait. Not because God is urgent in the way that fear is urgent, but because what is being revealed in this season is time-sensitive. In the best possible way. The lid is coming off something that has been sealed for too long, a truth that has lived in the shadows of your family's elder care narrative is being brought into the light. And the person heaven is speaking about right now is not someone who sacrificed to care for aging parents. It is not someone who managed medications, coordinated doctor appointments, handled daily needs, or sat through crisis after crisis. It is the sibling who showed up for photo ops, the one who was there when it looked good, the one who told everyone they were devoted caregiver while you did the actual work. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something right now. Check the pinned comment below. There is something waiting there that will help you receive what comes next. This is part of the process. Read it now, then come back here. Chosen One. Heaven is exposing the sibling who took credit for caring for aging parents you actually cared for. What they did when they performed caregiving in public while you performed it in private. When they accepted praise for sacrifice you made. When they positioned themselves for inheritance based on devotion they faked is not support. It is credit theft. It is elder care fraud, and heaven is handling it in ways that will expose who the real caregiver was. You have felt it for a long time. That strange frustration when extended family praised your sibling for being so devoted to your parents. The way your actual caregiving was invisible while their occasional visits were celebrated. The pattern of them being absent for the hard parts and present for the parts that could be photographed or posted about. You dismissed these feelings more times than you can count. You told yourself that any help was good help. You told yourself that you did not need credit because you were doing it out of love. That if you said anything you would sound bitter. That your parents knew who was really there, even if extended family did not. But Chosen One, you did know it. You have always known it. The knowing was not unclear. The knowing was simply too painful to fully accept. Because accepting it means confronting something that most people refuse to acknowledge happens in families. It means admitting that the sibling who got the credit was not the sibling who did the work. That elder care has visible parts and invisible parts, and your sibling only did the visible. That when inheritance is distributed, when eulogies are written, when family stories are told, you will be erased from the narrative of who cared for your parents because your sibling controlled the story. Today that changes because God has a different kind of love than the kind that protects people from necessary truth. His love is the kind that exposes what is hidden so that healing can actually begin. And what he is exposing today is not meant to make you resent your parents. It is meant to deliver you from the invisibility of being the real caregiver, while someone else gets celebrated for it. Type 777 if you have carried the weight of being the actual caregiver, while a sibling took credit for work you did. Before I tell you what they did, I want you to understand something about who you are, because the story of their credit theft begins with you. Not with your need for recognition, but with your willingness to serve without it. You have always carried something that made this exploitation possible, a commitment to caring for your parents that was not dependent on being seen or praised, a willingness to do the hard, invisible labor of elder care without needing credit, a love for your parents that meant you showed up for medication management, bathroom assistance, middle-of-the-night emergencies, financial coordination, doctor appointments, and all the unglamorous necessary work that keeps aging people safe and comfortable. That service was real and costly, and it should have been honored. It should have been recognized by your family as the sacrifice it was. But when your siblings started performing visible caregiving, when they showed up for Sunday dinners and family gatherings, and posted on social media about being devoted, your actual caregiving became the invisible foundation for their performance. Because you were doing the real work, your sibling could do the visible work without the relationship falling apart. You were managing the daily crisis. They were managing the optics. And everyone saw the optics. No one saw the crisis management, except you and your parents. And sometimes, not even your parents, because part of good caregiving is making things feel smooth when they are actually very hard. So you, in your faithful daily labor, in your unglamorous sacrifice, in your willingness to do what needed to be done without performing it for an audience, became the person whose work could be stolen, the caregiver whose credit could be taken, the child whose devotion could be erased from the family story. This is where the theft began, not in a single lie, but in a sustained performance of caregiving that looked real to people who were not paying close attention, while the actual caregiving you were doing remained invisible. Now, let me tell you specifically what they did, not in vague spiritual language, not in metaphor, but plainly, because you deserve to see the pattern clearly, so that you can finally stop feeling guilty for wanting credit for work you actually did. The first thing they did was show up for the visible caregiving moments, while being absent for the invisible daily work. They came to Sunday dinners and sat with your parents. They attended family gatherings where your parents were present and made sure to be seen helping. They posted on social media about spending time with mom and dad, about being blessed to have them, about treasuring every moment. They created a public narrative of devoted child. But the daily work, the real caregiving, that was yours. You were the one managing their medications, making sure prescriptions were filled, coordinating doctor appointments and attending them, handling their finances when they could no longer do it themselves, helping with bathing, eating, when they needed that level of care, sitting with them through medical emergencies, making decisions about care levels, facilities, end-of-life planning. You were the one they called in the middle of the night when something was wrong. You were the one who rearranged your life, your work schedule, your family obligations to make sure your parents were cared for. And your sibling who showed up for photo opportunities and pleasant moments was not there for any of that. They were not managing the hard logistics. They were not making the difficult decisions. They were not sacrificing their time or their peace. They were performing devotion while you were actually being devoted. Type "I believe" if your sibling showed up for visible caregiving moments while you handled invisible daily elder care work. The second thing they did was tell extended family and friends that they were the primary caregiver. In conversations with relatives who did not see the daily reality, your sibling positioned themselves as the one taking care of your parents. They said it was hard, but they were managing. They accepted sympathy and praise. They told stories that made it sound like they were making significant sacrifices. And because they were good at the performance, because they showed up when extended family was around, because they created content that portrayed devoted caregiving, people believed them. And you, who were actually doing the work, often did not correct the record, because you were too busy caregiving to manage public relations, because it felt petty to say, "Actually, I am the one doing this," because your sibling framed any attempt you made to clarify as you trying to compete for favorite child status. So the false narrative spread. Extended family praised your sibling. They thanked them for taking such good care of your parents. They told them how lucky your parents were to have such a devoted child, and your sibling accepted all of it without correcting them, without saying, "Actually, my sibling does most of this. I just help when I can." without giving you any credit at all for work you were doing daily. Type justice if your sibling told people they were the primary caregiver when you were actually doing the daily elder care work. The third thing they did was position themselves for inheritance based on caregiving they did not actually do. In conversations about wills, about who should get what, about how the estate should be distributed, your sibling made sure your parents and extended family knew how much they were sacrificing, how hard it was to be the caregiver, how much of their life they were giving up, and the implication was clear. The devoted caregiver should be rewarded, should get more, should be prioritized in the will because of the sacrifice they were making, and because the family believed your sibling was the primary caregiver. Because the narrative was that they were the one making sacrifices, the inheritance often reflected that false story. Your sibling got more, got the house, got the valuable items, got the bulk of the estate, while you who actually did the caregiving got less, or got equal distribution, which felt like injustice because you did more, but were not compensated for it. Type 333. If your sibling positioned themselves for inheritance based on caregiving devotion they performed, but you actually provided. The fourth thing they did was erase you from the caregiving story after your parents passed. When your parents died, when eulogies were written, when family stories were told about who was there for them in the final years, your sibling was centered. They were remembered as the devoted child, the one who sacrificed, the one who made sure mom and dad were cared for. And you who actually did that work were either not mentioned or were mentioned as someone who helped. But your sibling was the real hero. The family narrative became that your sibling was the caregiver. And correcting that narrative after your parents were gone felt impossible, because challenging it made you look like you were trying to compete for credit at a funeral, like you could not let your sibling have their moment of being honored, like you were bitter about inheritance or recognition. So the false story became the official story, the one that would be told to future generations, the one that would define how your family remembered who cared for your parents. And you, the actual caregiver, became invisible in the story of your own sacrifice. Chosen one. I want to pause here and speak to something that has been one of the most painful parts of this entire dynamic. Not the lack of credit itself, though that stings. Not the inheritance disparity, though that feels unjust. But something quieter, and in many ways more damaging than either of those things. The invisibility of your sacrifice in your own family's memory. Because, chosen one, when you care for an aging parent, when you sacrifice your time, your energy, your peace, your resources to make sure they are safe and comfortable, you are not doing it for credit. You are doing it because you love them, because it is the right thing to do, because they cared for you when you were helpless, and now you care for them when they are helpless. That is not transactional. That is love. But love does not mean you should be erased from the story. Love does not mean someone else should get to perform what you did and take the credit. Love does not mean your sacrifice should be invisible, while someone else's performance should be celebrated. And the wound of being the invisible caregiver, of having your actual work stolen by someone who did the visible parts, of watching your sibling be honored for devotion you demonstrated. That wound is deep because it is not just about credit. It is about being seen. It is about your parents, your family, the people who should know better, acknowledging what you actually did. And when that acknowledgement does not come, when your sibling gets praised for your work, when the family story erases you, it feels like your sacrifice did not matter, like you could have done nothing, and the outcome would have been the same, because your sibling got the credit regardless. Heaven is holding space for that wound today. Your sacrifice mattered. Your work was real. And being invisible in your family story does not make you invisible to heaven. Chosen one. If this message has named the wound you thought no one else understood, if you feel seen for the first time in your caregiving story, then I need to ask you something. This word didn't come easy. It came through late nights pressing into God's heart, asking Him to speak to the invisible caregivers who carry this specific pain. If you have been fed here, sow a seed where you were fed. Buy me a coffee through the link in the description or pinned comment below. Your seed isn't just supporting a channel. It is ensuring that tomorrow, when another invisible caregiver searches for answers in the middle of the night, this message will be here waiting. When you give to the place that fed your spirit, you become part of their breakthrough too. Now, chosen one, let me speak to you about what is happening in this moment. Because the exposure is not a future event, it is already in motion. Heaven does not announce justice and then wait. When God decides to reveal what was done in families, the process begins immediately, and it works from the inside of the dynamic outward. People are starting to ask questions. Extended family members who believed your sibling's narrative are noticing inconsistencies. They are realizing that your sibling was not actually there as much as they claimed, that the timeline does not match, that the level of care your parents received required more than occasional visits and photo ops. Healthcare providers who saw who was actually at appointments are recognizing you as the real caregiver. Financial institutions that dealt with your parents' affairs know you were the one managing things. People who were actually present during the hard years see the truth even if they did not speak it before. And your sibling's performance is being exposed as exactly that. Performance. The social media posts look hollow. Now, the stories they told sound exaggerated. The credit they took feels stolen. And people who praise them are starting to feel foolish for believing the narrative. Type, I trust God. If you believe that what God has set in motion on your behalf cannot be stopped by anyone. Now, chosen one, let me speak to you about what this season requires of you, because the exposure that heaven is delivering is not an invitation for you to go to every family member and correct the record. It is not permission to demand that your sibling publicly acknowledge you were the real caregiver. It is not a mandate to contest inheritance based on caregiving credit. The exposure is heaven's assignment, not yours. And your assignment in this season is something that requires more strength than vindication. It requires you to know your own record, even when the family story erases it. Knowing your own record means being secure in what you actually did, regardless of who gets credited for it. It means recognizing that your sacrifice was real, your caregiving was genuine, your devotion was demonstrated, and none of that is diminished by your sibling taking credit. It means building your identity on what you know to be true about yourself, rather than on what your family believes about you. It means accepting that you may never be publicly honored for what you did, and choosing to be at peace with that because your parents knew, you know, and heaven knows. Chosen one, the moment you have been waiting for, where your sibling admits they took credit for your work, where the family publicly acknowledges you were the real caregiver, where you are honored the way you should have been. That moment may never come, and you do not need it. What you need is to release the need for your family to see you accurately, and build your peace on knowing the truth yourself. Type release if you are ready to know your own caregiving record without needing your family to acknowledge it. Let me tell you what you were not wrong about. Because chosen one of the deepest wounds this dynamic left was not the credit theft itself, but the gaslighting that made you question whether you were being petty for wanting acknowledgement. When you felt hurt that your sibling got praise for work you did, people told you that caregiving should not be about credit. When you mentioned that you were actually the primary caregiver, you were told you sounded bitter. When you wanted your sacrifice acknowledged, you were made to feel like you were keeping score. And over time you started to believe that maybe wanting credit for your work was wrong. That maybe you should just be happy your parents were cared for, regardless of who got acknowledged for it. That maybe the problem was not your sibling stealing credit, but your need to receive it. You were not wrong for wanting acknowledgement. You were not keeping score by recognizing that you did work someone else got credited for. What you wanted was not praise for praise's sake. It was accurate recognition of who actually sacrificed. And that is not transactional love. That is honest record keeping. Heaven is confirming it today, so that you can finally set down the weight of false pettiness you have been carrying, and walk into what is next with the full confidence that wanting your actual caregiving work acknowledged is not selfish. It is human. And your sibling taking credit for work you did is theft, even if the work was done in love. ChosenOne scripture tells us in Matthew 6:3-4, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." This verse is about giving without needing public recognition, about serving quietly, about doing good work that only God sees. And you lived this. Your caregiving was secret in the sense that it was invisible to most of your family. It was the daily work no one photographed, the sacrifice no one posted about, the labor that happened when no one was watching, except your parents and God. And the promise is clear. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Your sibling may have gotten earthly credit, family praise, inheritance based on false narrative. But heaven saw what you actually did, and the reward coming from heaven will eclipse anything your sibling received from people who believed a lie. If you receive this truth, that God saw your secret caregiving and is preparing a reward that eclipses earthly inheritance, then let me ask you to do something. Every word you just read came through someone saying yes to creating messages for wounds the world ignores. If this ministry has given you language for pain you couldn't name, would you sow into it? Buy me a coffee, not out of obligation, but because you understand that when we give to the kingdom work that fed us, we are multiplying its reach. Your seed ensures the next invisible caregiver finds this truth. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Give what God puts on your heart and watch Him honor your obedience. Now, chosen one, let me speak about what is coming next for you, because this exposure is not the end of the story. It is the clearing of the ground for something new to be built. Heaven does not remove what is toxic without preparing something healthy to be there in its place. When heaven clears a space, it is preparing it for something specific. And what is specific in this season is the honoring of invisible labor. The gift of people who see what you do even when it is not performed. The blessing of relationships where service is acknowledged rather than stolen. The people coming into your life now. The relationships being formed. The connections being made. Those are people who value real work, overperformed work, who see sacrifice that is not posted, who honor labor that is invisible to others. You are about to experience what it feels like to serve and be seen, to sacrifice and be acknowledged, to give without needing to perform and still receive credit. This is the season where your invisible work becomes visible to the people who matter. This is the season where your record of caregiving is honored, even if your family never acknowledges it. This is the season where the caregiver who was erased from the family story becomes the person whose service is seen and celebrated by heaven, and by people who have eyes to see. And the most beautiful part of this moment is that you do not have to prove what you did. The people who matter will see it without you performing it. Type breakthrough if you are ready to step into visible honoring of your invisible labor. Chosen one, receive this now. You were not wrong. You were not being petty. You were not keeping score. You were the real caregiver whose work was stolen by a sibling, who performed devotion you actually demonstrated. And that is not your shame to carry. What was hidden is now being exposed. What was invisible is being seen. What was stolen is being restored. Walk forward. Heaven has gone ahead of you, and what is waiting on the other side of this exposure is worth every moment of the wait. Chosen one last thing before you go. The sibling who took credit for caregiving you actually did. Whatever their reasons, whatever their performance, they are not the authors of your story. They were characters in a chapter that is now closing. They do not have the pen. They never had the pen. The one who holds the pen of your life is the same one who sealed something over you before you were born, who watched every moment of what you walked through, who saw every act of caregiving your sibling did not do, and who is now writing the chapter that comes after the credit theft. That chapter, chosen one, is one that neither they nor their stolen narrative will be able to touch. Your story is not finished. It is turning, and the turn is in your favor. If something here spoke to your heart, quietly confirmed what God has been stirring inside you, take a moment and write Amen in the comments as a simple act of agreement. Your angels are aware of this. Your new chapter activates. Heaven is awaiting your response. And if you know someone who is experiencing elder care credit theft, whose caregiving work was invisible while sibling performed, share this message with them. Send this to everyone on your heart right now by clicking the share button. When you share this, the freedom that touched you starts to move through you. What you give will come back to you pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Subscribe so we can continue walking this journey of faith together. Click the subscribe button right away and make sure the notification bell is on. One final word. If this message found you at exactly the right time, if you feel like heaven orchestrated this moment, consider this. Someone gave so this word could exist today. Now you have a choice: receive and walk away, or receive and ensure the next person finds it too. The link for buying me a coffee is below. Every seed sown here becomes light for someone else's darkness. Give as the Spirit leads. Your generosity is seen in heaven. And remember, as you leave today, you are not preparing for what is next anymore. You are already stepping into it. Your new chapter has begun. Amen.